behind them. Casey Cares is the intersection of the nonprofit and profit communities, making Kansas City a better place to live, work, and play. This Casey Cares segment is brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, www.kaufman.org. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggest. People who have been incarcerated often face an uphill battle when it comes to employment opportunities. The Bureau of Justice Statistics claims that approximately 60% of formerly incarcerated individuals will struggle with unemployment compared to the low unemployment rate of just under 4% for the general population. Those who've experienced incarceration spend 0.8 to 4.2 years without jobs. These are daunting odds, but they didn't stop Na'am Al-Amin. Incarcerated for a number of years, Na'am left prison and worked to make his future, as well as that for others, productive. Na'am started Swagg Inc. It's a local nonprofit focused on promoting ownership for those who have been incarcerated and working to prevent others from going down that path. We welcome Na'am to Casey Cares. It's so great to have you.
Good morning, Ruth, and I'm grateful to be here. Glad to be with Casey Cares this morning.
Well, I feel like we should really start with your sharing your story and your journey. It goes back even to childhood, and I was a little shocked when I learned that. Would you share what you feel comfortable with?
Absolutely, and I appreciate you for allowing me to elaborate on my story and the 30-year journey has been in introducing a new business model in the mass incarceration space. And so for me, I like to think of it as environmental when we consider the way that an environment can impact someone's trajectory or their future. And so for me, that would come by way of the foster care system. I was born in Junction City, Kansas with my nucleus family, and I was eventually placed in foster care because of my mother's dysfunction and struggles with alcoholism. And in that environment, I went from Junction City, Kansas to Los Angeles, California. Went from a place where I was introduced to gangs, graffiti, drugs, militarization of police presence in the community, things that I hadn't seen before. And I was approached by a gang and they asked me to commit a robbery. But the way that they approached me, Ruth, was interesting. They said to me, hey, we know you just moved into that home. Do you know?
Again. So you were telling us about you're in LA, and how did you get introduced into a life of crime?
Right. Well, it would come by way of the environment that I would be introduced to. And so I went from a place where I enjoyed my nucleus family, my sisters, my cousin. We didn't have any police sirens or any gunshots in our environment, our gang's presence, right? I didn't know anything about that culture. But being in Los Angeles, California in the late 80s, that was the climate of the day. And so I was approached by a gang in my neighborhood. They said, hey, we know you just moved to this foster home. Do you know who your father is? I said, no, I don't. They said, well, here's a gun. Go rob somebody, bring us what you get back, or you can't live here. And that was my instructions. And I was terrified.
I bet you were. How old were you?
This was 1987, and I was 8 years old when this happened.
Oh, my gosh.
Yep. But what's perturbing, Ruth, is my experience in the police stations or my interaction with the police. I mean, they processed, booked me, fingerprinted, took photographs of me, and placed me in a cell with grown men. They never directed me to talk to a social worker or a counselor or even ask how I got in this position, right? And that would be my introduction to the criminal justice system at 8 years old and create a trajectory for me 18, 21, and 35 in terms of being incarcerated 3 times as an adult.
It's very hard to wrap my head around that and what that experience must have been. Can you share a little bit of what happened, with those other times? Obviously, did you go into a juvenile justice system when you were that young? And right, then what happened subsequently?
Absolutely. To unpack that further, at 9 years old, I started drinking. At 10, I seen someone murdered for the first time. And by 11, I was running away from the foster care system to escape the sexual and physical abuses that I was experiencing, not only by my foster parents, but also by the other boys in the group home. And so I ran away and I joined one of the largest gangs in Los Angeles, California, in the Rolling 60 Crips, as a way to protect myself and have some semblance of family. And I would actually be introduced to juvenile hall at 13. That's where I actually turned 13 in juvenile hall. And so it's been a progression of me having birthdays in an incarcerated setting and returning to the community, pressing the start over button, right? And so that's what this journey has been like for me, and the things that I had to overcome in developing a 10-rung ladder, if you will, to illustrate my social upward mobility. And so for me, my 10 rungs would be dysfunction, trauma, poverty, systemic racism, foster care, gang life, prison, also disenfranchisement, and then moving on to ownership on that 10th rung through the vehicle of social entrepreneurship, creating a nonprofit that introduced a new business model in the mass incarceration space to elevate people who have been impacted like I have.
Okay, I feel there's a jump in there somewhere, though, that we missed. So you've gone through the system, in terms of foster care and then joining a gang, and you were in the criminal justice system. When did you come out, and what was that like for you?
Right. So I came out of different timelines in my adulthood, right? And so I went in at 18 in 1997, right after graduating high school, and I went for kidnapping. And it was a situation in which I didn't commit that crime, but I said I did in order to protect someone because I was under that mindset, right? That gangbang mindset. And so that's where my loyalties lied. And I hadn't got my prison stripes yet, right? And that is a rites of passage, however counterintuitive it may sound for us that are in that culture, right? Being able to have your prison stripes is equivalent to, being a king. And so that's what I was striving for. And I was able to get that. And so nevertheless, I didn't commit the crime. And so that's the disenfranchisement. The prosecutor and the defendant, they read the statement that said I didn't have anything to do with it. And the person that did, that they let go. And the judge was upset about that. And he gave me 10 years and he suspended 8.5 for that. So I received a year and a half in prison. I did that time and I came back out to the community and I went right back to what I was doing, which was gang banking and selling drugs, because again, my mindset hasn't elevated yet. And I was still stuck in that idea that this is all I had because this is all that my environment communicated to me, right? And I think the perceived instability theory speaks to that. Your environment either supports your upper social mobility or it confirms that, there is no upper social mobility for you, right? And so that's where I was at in my life at that time. Progressing on to 21, when I went to prison a second time, in the interim of that, I experienced a lot of loss, Ruth, in terms of that gangbang culture, losing a lot of friends, being shot myself, and just being in danger. And I decided at that time that I didn't want to be a part of that lifestyle anymore. However, I still see, for me, I grew up in the drug trade, right? That's the other byproduct of joining a gang, right? There's different routes you can take, right? You can be a killer, you can be a drug dealer, you can be someone that stays in the hood and is there for target practice, as we say, or you could just be there doing nothing. And so for me, it was about getting money, right? That's what I wanted to do. And that's what I did. And I came up through those gradations of first developing a relationship to have the product, which wasn't easy to do in the early 90s, and then having a corner to sell that on, moving on to a drug house, and then moving on to being able to go to be to have commerce in terms of transient in and out of state, right? And so that's the gradation that I came up through, and that's what I did, and that's what I brought with me at 21, even though I was done with that lifestyle of perpetuating violence. And I was arrested fairly quickly for possession of marijuana with intent to sell back in 2001. And so even though I had 21 grams, I was sent to prison. I received a 4-year prison sentence and I served 3.5. And really during that time is where I started to really do self-introspection about what I was responsible for in my life, the different things that I had been through and what I wanted to go moving forward. Mm-hmm. And I decided at that time, when I was stuck between a choice between life and death, I chose freedom through education. And so I said, when I get out of prison, I'm going to go to Kansas State University and I'm going to be able to start a career after I earn a degree. And subsequently, I would earn 3 degrees from Kansas State University, 2 bachelors of science, 1 in sociology, criminology, and an AS in psychology that transferred actually from Cloud Community College. And so I had a wonderful time at Kansas State University. I mean, I went from someone that that only seen white people that were in the positions of power in terms of police, and then also teachers at the grade school level where I didn't have favorable outcomes with them, right? And I was in an environment that was populated by Black people that looked like me. So I had no other interactions with anybody, right? Other than the people close in my environment and then those in authority, right? And so I was missing out on life as well. But Kansas State University, I had an opportunity to join the Student Government Association, connect with a lifelong friend, as it would turn out, in Adam Tank. I became president of the Criminology Club. I tried out for the K-State football team. That was awesome.
Wow.
Right. Under Prince and Snyder. So it was just an amazing experience where I got to cultivate myself and meet a lot of people and really learn the business of life through academia. And so how marvelous that experience was, Ruth. All the good things come to an end. And I graduated in 2010. And I hit the market hard with my degrees, and I went 0 for 200 over a 3-year period. No employer would hire me. They only referred to my drug offense that I went to prison for marijuana, right? And so I was going through a lot of different emotions in terms of, the path I'm gonna take. Because remember, I've made a decision where, I've decided that prior life, or those prior life experiences, was an indulgent time in my life where I took more than I gave, and I didn't want to revisit that and be that person again. But the first rule of nature is self-preservation. And, for me, I came up through the drug trade, and that was easy to get back into, and that's what I did. And I did that for a couple of years, and I remember going back home. It's 3 years now, and I'm like, wow, I'm doing the same thing. And I don't want to do it, but I happened to go to the Marathon store. Are you familiar with the Marathon store? I heard of the Marathon brand?
I am not.
Okay, well, here's a good story that I like to share with you about a conversation on legacy and how it changed my life. But I'm going back home. I'm beat up by the workforce. Can't get no opportunities. I'm back selling drugs. And I go to buy some drugs from home and bring it back to Kansas. And in the process, I run across one of my friends from my neighborhood who was in the process of signing their first major music deal. And his name is Nipsey Hussle. Have you heard of Nipsey Hussle, perchance?
Yes.
Okay, so that's Nipsey Hussle, and he has the Marathon brand. But we both grew up in the same community, from the same neighborhood, from the same gang. And there's a decade apart in terms of our age group, with me being a little older than Nip. And so, I'm excited to talk to him. And I'm like, yo, bro, who you going to sign with? Rick Ross or some other major label? And he's like, for me, it's about patience. I know the moment that I signed that contract, my life changes forever. It's about ownership, creating a long-term plan, and elevating the status of the people around me. That's what's important to me, which will ultimately become the values of our organization at Swagg Inc. But I didn't understand the language he was saying to me at the time. I had never heard this word, ownership, elevating the people around me, being patient in the midst of a multi-million-dollar deal, and want to reinvest in your community, and speaking about economics and ownership and business. All these things were new to me. And that's the magnificence of that 20-minute conversation that we had, because I would carry that and I would work on that business plan, incarcerated a third time at 35, with a 5-year prison sentence for not testifying on a friend that was under investigation. And that would be my 3rd time in prison after graduating Kansas State University, looking to start a career, getting shut out by the HR department, and, just really struggling to with self-efficacy and being able to provide for my family and those kind of things. And so, but I didn't let that stop me. I reflected on the conversation that I had with Nipsey, and also a conversation that I had with my daughter on the phone who was serving this 5-year prison sentence, right? My daughter, Azra, I was calling her to check on her. And I'm about 2 years in at this time, 2-3 years in. And I say, hey, baby, how you doing today? She says, Daddy, I'm doing good now, but I wasn't good earlier. I said, why? What happened? She said, well, we had donuts with Dad Day and my seat was empty, but my friend's wasn't. I said, wow, yeah, it broke my heart. Started tearing up immediately. And I was torn because, mass incarceration. So it's really less about those that are incarcerated and more about what they leave behind, family, society, and economy. And in this situation, you had a judge, a prosecutor, a public pretender, a bailiff, a clerk, right, who all knew that I committed no crime but sent me to prison for 5 years, right? And so I knew that there was guilt by association, but I also knew that I wasn't given opportunity. And so it's kind of it's a struggle when, you're disenfranchised and you're still trying to seek ownership, right, in yourself. And but I was able to materialize that through writing the business model for Swagg Inc, in terms of. So
you wrote it while you were in prison?
Absolutely. I was in Lansing Correctional Facility, serving a part of my 5-year prison sentence. And again, another story with my daughter, she seems to inspire the best of me. Even against my will, I didn't want her to come to a maximum security prison to see me. But it had been a few years and she needed to see her dad. And so my mom, she brought her up to see me. And she says to me, she says, Daddy, she says, when I went to prison, she was 4. She's about 7 now. She's missed me at Donuts with Dad's Day, and she's having conversations, I imagine, about my absence and what jail means and these kind of things. And so she says to me, what did you do to get in here? And I said, I put the family before the streets. And she said, nah, tell me what you did, Daddy. What'd you do? And I said, well, I was selling drugs. And she said, well, why would you do that? And I said, well, I was having a hard time finding a job. And she said, well, why wouldn't you be more patient? And I said, well, I should have consulted with you first. I should have consulted with you first, right? And so then I remember what Nipsey told me about being patient and about ownership and creating a long-term plan and elevating the status of the people around you. And so I started looking at my environment in a different way, as a way to be collaborative. And I didn't know it then, Ruth, but I was using the 5 principles of design thinking to craft out my business plan in Lansing Correctional Facility. Those principles being empathy, ideate, prototype, define, and test. So again, empathy, ideate, prototype, define, and test. And the empathy piece, what we're doing is looking to solve for the pain points of someone before generating revenue, right? And so that's the idea, and that's what we're able to do. The ideate part is, what services do you need? And for everybody that I talked to in that environment was if I had employment prior to release, right? That was the main tenet, having employment prior to release. Empathy, ideate, prototype. Never go in, never go back, and help employers change the way they recruit, right? Connecting employers to that untapped talent in the Department of Corrections. Define. Swagg Inc. Serve, witness, and give guidance. Inspiration never ceases. And that's what we do. And test, again, never go in, never go back, and helping employers change the way they recruit. And we had a proof in concept with UPS, which was the employer that gave me my first opportunity out of prison. I was hired as a package handler. Within 4 months, I was promoted to human resources. I introduced my business plan as I had been transversing through the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Kansas City, Mo. Shout out to the ecosystem. Shout out to Rick Usher for doing a fantastic job. And the Management saw value, allowed me to work autonomously, co-brand, Swagg Inc, UPS, and focus my hiring initiatives on returning citizens. And in a year, I was able to increase retention by 70%, attendance by 50%, and zero recidivism, meaning none of our clients returned back to prison after hiring. And this was really phenomenal, Ruth. We had UPS HR team in the one of the 44 districts probation and parole offices doing a hiring fair, right? And hiring in real time. And I'm the HR supervisor where they'd be working with, and also the community partner in the nonprofit that is supporting them in the community and the employer. And so that's how we would branch off to being able to partner with larger corporations like J. Edon Construction, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and Goodwill Industries.
This is an amazing story. What resilience you have, and what a wise daughter. Maybe you should hire your daughter, you know? She seems to be quite the go-getter and wise beyond her years. I would like for you to just tell us, you know, briefly, if you can, how did you go about then establishing Swagg? Here you are, you come out, you finally get some employment, some stability, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to do a nonprofit. And this is what I want to do. So how did you make that happen?
Well, it really speaks to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. But also being a visionary, I didn't know at the time that I was introducing a model that had never been seen before in terms of pre-entry planning, working with people 1 year prior to release in prison, offering a suite of services, and then also 1 to 3 years in the community, helping them to discharge probation and parole while having partnered with employers that will compensate us to recruit for them, and leveraging our 501c3 taxes entity with donors, foundations, and granting opportunities. And so I didn't know all this was going on, but it would be through education, which is really the vehicle to ownership. And I had an opportunity to be in the Aaron Levitt Changemaker Challenge offered by UMKC. I participated in Determination Incorporated's entrepreneur program for returning citizens 3 times over before I placed it the final 3rd time. I was in the first business cohort of Porterhouse KC, developing entrepreneurs. And in fact, that's where I met one of my best friends and mentors, and Joe Goldberg, the voice of the Kansas City Royals. In that cohort, I had an opportunity to be in the Heartland Chambers Business Encore program. And so it was a lot of upskilling and then a lot of presenting in that way. But I think the opportunity that allowed me to really share my story on scale and work with employment partners is the work that I do with our clients in that role as an HR supervisor with UPS. And so here's the timeline. So I was released from prison March 22nd, 2018, after serving 5 years. I was released homeless, geographically displaced, and without any money. And so I went through 2018. I was hired at UPS, and I did that up until 2020. So a couple of things happened. COVID was introduced, and the relationship that we had with probation and parole that allowed us to do those in-person hiring events was no longer there. And so I was actually introduced to the Department of Corrections at a state level, which was then Kansas City Reentry Center. And at that time in 2020, they had no warden and no reentry coordinator, right? And so who's manning the helm? That was the first question I had. and what
who's managing the zoo?
Absolutely, you got it. And so we did that, and I was able to pitch KCR team on that pre-entry approach for a year, and they accepted that, and so I crafted out that model. At the same time, UPS was transitioning to AI to deliver their HR functions, and so I accepted the severance package, which allowed me to just transition fully into the role of the founder and CEO of Swagg Inc. And that would be the entrance into really being a part of a new funding model. And I had an opportunity to look at another one of your interviews with Chris Rawson of United Way, and he touched on the trust-based funding, right? And I thought that was really amazing, and really excited that he really unpacked what that looks like. Because prior to that model being introduced, as a social enterprise where we're looking at, empowering people, the metrics doesn't match with a foundation that's looking to make money, right? That kind of thing, right? They're not equipped for that. And so we went in a lot of conversations that were great, but ended up with no funding. So with the advent of that trust-based funding, which is really a collaborative relationship where, you allow this founder to fund the parts of their business that they need to be funded, and even funding them. And so for us, it would come through the Hadley Project KC. Have you heard of the Hadley Project KC, Ruth? Really? Oh, it's an amazing organization.
Well, tell us in a nugget, because I don't want us to end the program without you sharing too how the community can help what you're doing.
Absolutely. And so the Hadley Project KC is a trust-based funding entity. And so they support Black founders who focus on social inequities in their community, right? And they had a 3-year funding opportunity that we were able to be a part of. And we're in our 3rd year of that funding opportunity. And so it's been major in us being able to mobilize the idea we're sharing in terms of promoting ownership for people impacted by mass incarceration. The way that the community can support us is in sharing that idea, right, of promoting ownership for people impacted by mass incarceration. We're always looking for volunteers to connect with at Swagg Inc. We have amazing opportunities in the different parts of the services that we provide for our clients. We're over on Truths at Equal Minded Cafe and Event Center, and we have a support group every Sunday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. for people and families impacted by mass incarceration as a way to heal from that experience and connect with the community.
How many lives can you say you've touched and changed at this point?
That's a really great question. And I would have to say, this has been I'm going into my 5th year. And, again, I was in human resources at UPS. I was also at the Full Employment Council as a career development executive, and then being in the role of the founder and CEO of Swagg Inc. And so I would say upward to 1,000 at this point. I've been in decision-making roles in all 3 categories. And I'm just looking to help someone. I don't have any barriers. I'm just looking to help someone.
Well, you're doing it. I know you have a variety of programs. You have mentor opportunities. You have, you're trying to help those who come out get employed. It sounds like you're working within the business community. What would you say is your greatest challenge at this point?
Our greatest challenge has been the Department of Corrections being who they say they are. So our model is designed to be in an incarcerated setting. And I intimated, working with KCRC and helping them develop that model there. We went live in April of 2022, and Swagg Inc. is no longer a program and service provider there. We were kicked out because we held them accountable. We came from the premise of ownership and also that this is business, not charity. We have a DEI model at Swagg Inc. that we value. And so diversity for Swagg Inc. is developing relationship with employers that allow our clients to transition as stakeholders. Equity is creating market value assets that allow our clients to be portable amongst industries. And inclusion is promoting that ownership for people impacted by mass incarceration, but also elevating the people in positions of power to do something about it, right? And so when people elevate their mindsets, reduce their barriers, and provide access, we gotta be ready to go. We can't be disenfranchising people and just repeating the same thing, that recidivism model, that recipe for recidivism. Right. So that's the biggest challenge. But we're working through those challenges daily. We're still being able to connect with people and families and elevate them that have been impacted. We currently have 5 clients that we're serving. We had 3 go through our first cohort with J.E. Dunn Construction for opportunity there. We have a client working at Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and we want to say a tremendous thank you and shout out to Goodwill Industries for providing the supportive services that we need in terms of transportation, vouchers, food vouchers, also upskilling, and just being a resource to us. So we want to say thank you to them as well.
Na'am, you're doing incredible work. What guts, resilience, and everything. I want to make sure everybody knows. Go check out the organization at www.swagginc.org. Thank you so much for your time, and we will love watching you as you continue this journey.
All right. Thank you, Ruth. It's been a pleasure to be on KC Care.
Thank you for joining us for KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications, also a nonprofit. This KC Cares segment was brought to you by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, www.kauffman.org. If you'd like to be a guest on KC Cares like Na'am, or if you'd like to underwrite what we do in the community, visit our website, kccaresonline.org, and spread the love. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio, and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. And don't forget, you can catch us on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM. Thank you for joining us on KC Cares.